Countries in the East African economy will have to make sound economic decisions for the foreseeable future if they are to return to recent growth numbers in the wake of COVID-19. Kwezi Tabaro, Deputy Director at the Leo Africa Institute, spoke to us ahead of the upcoming annual Leaders Gathering.
I think Africa has escaped the worst of the pandemic. I know many people attempted to suggest that maybe for a variety of reasons, including luck, but I think by and large, leadership has played a critical role in how our individual countries, regions, and the continent generally has responded to this pandemic. So very much so going forward, how fast our economies recover and how sustainable that recovery is will come down to the kind of leadership that we have in place to drive our countries towards a recovery.
Right, the annual Leaders Gathering is coming up next month. What should we be looking forward to in terms of conversations? Of course, there will be a lot of discussion about how economies in the region will be bouncing back. What do you think we'll be hearing from there?
Well, in line with this year's theme, which is beyond the crisis, 2020 has, really brought to the fore not just the pandemic and the crisis associated with it, but it has, unleashed a number of other underlying crises that we had not paid much attention to. Of course, one crisis that very many will easily relate with is the significant economic impact that the pandemic has had on our regional economies. I think there's a study that came out in July by the Institute for Security Studies suggesting that Africa could be set back by at least 15 or 10 years as a result of the pandemic. And you'll have countries in the region like Uganda and Kenya having their GDP per capita reduced, in the case of Kenya, by about $150, and in the case of Uganda by about $50. So there's a serious economic crisis that has been caused by the pandemic. But also besides that, there are a number of other crises that have come to the fore. The racial crisis that the West is grappling with, that is reverberating in Africa, and the unending debate on Black Lives Matter, I think, are some of the major crises that we shall be focusing on at the annual Leaders Gathering. But beyond just grieving about these crises, I think we are at a very unique reset moment as a region and as a continent to really refocus our attention on the most critical and most important issues of our time. And I think one of them is how we can, build more resilient and more sustainable economies. So beyond the pace of economic growth, the numbers, we need to see meaningful change in the lives of our people. And I think it's one of those conversations we're really excited to be putting up, to see how different thought leaders, especially young people in the region, can reflect on this important moment and come up with solutions for not just their countries, but for our region as a whole.
Right, we have seen quite a few different efforts on behalf of young people throughout the region in terms of COVID-19 response. Many people taking up leadership roles in ways that they hadn't thought that they would before. What are some ways you think are going to come out of this summit that's coming up in terms of ways to uplift people and do what you described needs to be done alongside economic recovery on the continent?
Sure, and I think the crisis has really brought to the fore the tremendous energy and ingenuity of our young people. I know a number of our leaders in our countries have been asking young people to find meaningful ways they can contribute to their countries. And I think we've seen that through this pandemic, whether it's the frontline workers, majority of them, close to 70% of them in countries like Uganda, are fairly young people. and they've been at the front line and at the forefront of our country's response to COVID-19. So I think the debate that young people are, laid back, lazy, and lacked a meaningful contribution to the national agenda, I think has by and large been resolved by this pandemic, whether it's in the kinds of businesses like Jumia and other online delivery services that have brought services closer to us while we're working from home, or our young people working in critical sectors of the economy, whether it's in government or at the front line as healthcare workers. I think the role of young people cannot be understated in both how we've managed this crisis, but also how resilient going forward our countries can rebuild. So I think the role of young people is very important in this.
Right. In the past, there was a lot of focus on manufacturing as a critical industry in terms of the growth of African economies. And this year and last, we've seen a lot of conversation about trying to get more energy and young people into agriculture. What are some key industries you think are going to be focused on for this year's event?
Well, I think the knowledge industry to start with, because we live in the knowledge age, and platforms like Zoom, on which we're chatting today, were existent but really didn't play such a significant role until earlier this year. So the knowledge industry is going to be a key driver of our economy's recovery, both at country level but also at the regional level. But also increasingly we're seeing, especially in the case of Uganda and I think other countries in the East African community, countries promoting what they've called import substitution industrialization. And you see this in the kind of capacity we've managed to build as African countries, whether it's in manufacturing, personal protective gear, PPEs. There's quite a bit of work that is being done in Uganda to develop candidate vaccines. By November this year, we should have one of the vaccines in the pipeline and ready for trial. So clearly, I think the path for Africa cannot be one. We can't say, oh, it's only going to be industrialization, it's only going to be ICTs and the knowledge industry. But I think the most important thing and the lesson we've learned out of this is that the solutions will have to come from within. They cannot be imposed from the outside or suggested from the outside.